Ayman Khan here for Seconds Out with the incomparable Sun boxing columnist Colin Hart. Colin Hart, sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Good to see you. Good to see you in full and good health. Anthony Joshua returns against Jermaine Franklin this weekend. It feels like a big fight, Phil, but maybe not of the stature that we're used to when it concerns Anthony Joshua.
Well, this is an enormously big fight for obvious reasons. It's a big fight for Joshua, and it's a big fight for Franklin. Let's face it, a few months ago, nobody had ever heard in this country of Franklin. And if the shock should happen on Saturday night and he should beat Anthony Joshua, not that I'm expecting it, I mean, he's right up there with all the big names, the Furies, the Wilders, the Joyces, Dubois. He's amongst them.
How much jeopardy do you think there is in this fight, considering maybe the boxing public are writing off Jermaine Franklin to a degree, but is there that jeopardy? Eddie Hearn says, look, if Anthony Joshua loses, he's done. Is that on the line here?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. I mean, Joshua has not only got to win on Saturday, but he's got to look good doing it. You know, Josh was outside the mainstream because of what happened in those two fights with Usyk. If he wins on Saturday but looks good doing it, he's right back up there in the mix. Usyk and Fury was going to be a very big fight. Believe me, Joshua and Fury is very much bigger.
What is the path then for Anthony Joshua to return back to the big time? I'm talking the top fights. It feels like White may be next and then a fight between Fury and Wilder if it can be made for Anthony Joshua.
Well, there's all sorts of possibilities. First of all, he's got to beat Franklin. Now, I know he's going to be a very, very big favourite, but this is heavyweight boxing. Franklin, from what I've seen of him, this trip compared to when he fought White, seemed to have slimmed down. Franklin obviously fancies this big time in view of what happened to Joshua in his last two fights. And I should think he's probably in the peak of fitness. He's probably never been as fit as he is for this weekend. Mustn't take anything for granted. If Joshua wins, they will start negotiating with Fury. I'm convinced of it. If that doesn't happen, then there's always Dubois, Joyce, and Wilder. So there's big fights for him. If he should lose, that's the end as far as I'm concerned.
Boxing throws up all sorts of interesting circumstances, so much so in fight week sometimes. In this fight week, Jermaine Franklin is launching a lawsuit against his own promoter in Demetrius Lito. Have you heard about that lawsuit and how likely is it for Franklin to win that?
Well, look, I don't know the ins and outs of their contract and their financial dealings. What a surprise that a fighter is suing his manager or promoter. It's been going on ever since boxing began. I don't know the details of it, so it's stupid of me to pass an opinion. All I know is it's not unusual.
Now, moving on, Conor Benn seems to be returning to action. Either it's Manny Pacquiao or it might even be Chris Eubank Jr. He was supposed to fight Liam Smith in a rematch, but it seems it's more likely Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. over in Abu Dhabi. What do you know?
I just hope it's not Pacquiao. Pacquiao is in his mid-40s. It would be a terrible shame to see Pacquiao back in the ring, as far as I'm concerned, after such a tremendous career. I mean, that's, he's way past his best. I can understand the Eubank fight going ahead because he'll make big pay-per-view returns, no doubt about that. And I would think that if they did fight, I'm against it, like I was the original one. The discrepancy between the size of Eubank and Conor Benn Jr. is far too great for me.
Could the British Boxing Board of Control put a setback in the way in terms of giving Chris Eubank Jr. the opportunity to fight abroad, because considering he has to fight abroad on a UK licence, so there might even potentially the range of possibilities here. They could suspend him, they could fine him, or even withdraw his licence. So what's the status there?
Well, they could do, I suppose. He's fighting as far as the British board are concerned, technically he'd be fighting an unlicensed boxer. But it's happening abroad. I don't think they've got any jurisdiction over that. I don't know the rule book that well. But even if they do stop it, there'd be another lawsuit.
dangerous signals, though, here. Essentially, the conclusion can be drawn that, and will be drawn by the diehards, that all parties involved in the fight, if the fight does go ahead, are essentially complicit in damaging the sport and, the defense of stopping fighters who fail drug tests from fighting. So you're complicit in allowing that, in a sense. Is that right?
Well, yes. I mean, Conor Benn, I know, has been pleading his innocence ever since the story broke. And, of course, as far as the WBC are concerned, he is an innocent man. They've said, as far as we're concerned, carry on with your career. So, it's again, we're in a legal minefield here.
I haven't spoke to you since the Fury-Usyk deal collapsed. Who do you attribute the blame or the responsibility for that fight collapsing?
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Do you think the fight does happen later on in the year?
Never say never, particularly in boxing. At the moment, it's dead in the water because Fury will go on and do other things. Usyk will fight Dubois, who's its mandatory, WBA mandatory. If he doesn't, if they cannot come to some negotiations, which is which both sides will agree with, and hypothetically, Usyk gives up the WBA title, automatically Dubois, who's the regular WBA champion, becomes the WBA champion. So Dubois certainly has nothing to lose.
Do you feel that the fight being made is contingent on Saudi Arabia being involved? That fight will only happen in Saudi Arabia, Fury and Usyk?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, Usyk and Dubois could be a big fight in this country. I'm not saying it's a Wembley fight. It's definitely not a Wembley Stadium fight. But it could be at Spurs Ground or one of the big arenas in the country. It would sell and it would do well on pay-per-view. It would be a unification fight. And, it's a fight which I'm sure the fans would find attractive.
What about Tyson Fury's next option? We always hear Manny Chia coming in and out the shadows. There's this Francis Ngannou exhibition as well in the shadows. Surely Fury, if he's not fighting Usyk, has to fight someone credible.
Well, yes. I mean, there's Joe Joyce waiting in the shadow. I mean, Joe has got a fight on April the 15th, which I expect him to come through okay. That could lead to a Joyce-Fury fight sometime in late summer, or shall we say September. That's on the cards. Fury could make a defence against Joe Schmo and probably sell, because he's that big now. He's a character. He's charismatic. He's got a mesmerising personality. People just want to go and see him and listen to him. Yeah. So everything's possible for Fury.
Frank Warren said on TalkSport today that he felt that a big reason as to why the fight didn't happen to Fury and Usyk was the social media shenanigans, the back and forth between the two. Do you feel that the social media day and age is costing us big fights?
I don't know, because I'm not involved with social media. I'm the last man on the planet not to even have a mobile phone.
Fair enough, Colin. Just a couple of other things before I let you go. DAZN now, they've made the launch over to Sky. Eddie Hearn is back on Sky. They're now launching in pubs too. It feels like the competition, from DAZN's point of view, is ramping up.
It certainly does, and there's nothing wrong with competition. Puts everybody on their toes in the business, and so good luck to them. I mean, I think they've done a wise move by going on a Sky channel, because nobody knew how to get hold of well, shall we say nobody, but not a lot of people knew how to get DAZN. So now they know where to find it.
Where do you stand on the current quality of fights being made in the UK? You have Boxer, you have Eddie Hearn with Matchroom, Frank Warren, Wasserman is involved as well. But is the quality there for boxing fans who want to watch the fights right now?
Well, obviously there are certain fights that are bigger than others. But as I say, to have these guys up against each other is good for boxing, because it's competition. And you cannot beat competition. Then therefore, neither Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn, or the guy who runs Boxer can be complacent.
Final question from me. Eddie Hearn seems confident that he could make an Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder fight. There's been back and forth in the past between him and Shelley Finkel. Are you confident that mega fight can be made?
I'm confident about any fight. After Usyk and Fury fell through, how can you be confident of anything happening? But I would like to see it. Wilder and Joshua would be big bucks.
Who would you pick right now?
Wilder.
By knockout?
Yeah. Well, he's not going to win on points.
I guess not. Colin, pleasure speaking to you. I guess you won this one on points. Thank you for speaking to Seconds Out, sir. Much appreciated. Thank you.